off now. Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight for another UK Azure meeting. If any of you were in the last meeting with Liam Kavanagh on Azure Search, I've posted the recording onto our YouTube channel, so you can catch up with that. It was a really sort of good forward-thinking meeting around semantic search. Thanks for joining tonight. We're going to have a change of gears. We've got a team of 3 presenting. I'll let them all introduce themselves. We have Carl, Devi and Kris tonight that are going to talk about migration of SQL to Microsoft Azure. This is something that I've been learning more about over the last 6 months or so from very structured Microsoft programs, and there's a lot of nuances and complexities, tools that you need to use, challenges, there's design paradigms. So there's a whole process around, starting off by being prepared and understanding what you need to do to follow a migration plan, and all of the tools and challenges that you get along the way. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Carl and let the team introduce themselves. Thanks, Carl. Please take it away.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rich. So welcome everybody. For those of you that don't know me or haven't met me, I lead the ops and support team at Elastic Cloud. I'm actually a Linux DevOps nerd at heart, so it was really natural when I was going to speak to you about migrating SQL workloads to Azure. But as techies, we have many hats, don't we? And we have to be agnostic at times when it comes to various technologies. And as part of that, my team and the wider Elastic Cloud team, we recently attained a new accreditation, and we're now SQL Windows Migration Specialist Partner. Now, what that means is we've been independently verified as a very good at migrating SQL and Windows to Azure. But with the bragging bit out of the way, I just want to quickly in the next 10 or so minutes just present some of the cool things that we've learned to share with the community, and also hope to give you some inspiration. And normally when I give a slide deck like this, it would be for Microsoft in their workshops. It's often full of loads of sales pitches, but I'm going to skip all the salesy bit and just talk about the things that will hopefully be useful to you as an audience. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the AMP program really quickly, which is how we came to understand or be specialists in migrating SQL. And what it is it's a program that Microsoft have created, designed to give their customers and partners as well the ability to migrate to the cloud, particularly Azure, in the best way. And it's designed to not only give you funding to pay for premier Azure partners like Elastic Cloud and many others to help you migrate your workload, but you also get expert help specifically from the Microsoft Fast Track team, people that really know what they're doing, really embedded in Azure. You'll be given guidance to adapt best practices through the Cloud Adoption Framework. If you don't know what that is, you should know what that is. If you're working with Azure, it should be your Bible for deploying in Azure. But the other key thing, you also get free tools, but also technical skill building as well. So it will enable you to upskill your own team or be upskilled by a partner or Microsoft as well. And it gives you that opportunity that once you've migrated, you actually can manage it, the platform yourself. So it is really good. And if you're actually a partner rather than a consumer, you can actually join this program as well. You need to obviously talk to your Microsoft rep. It is a bit of a process to go through. It is designed to really ensure that the quality of deploying to Azure, but you should reach out to them as well. If you're a consumer, you're interested, there's that link there at the bottom, azure.com/amp. Yeah, you can sign up there, or you can reach out to me or Rich or anyone else in Elastic Cloud, or your own partner as well. Now you might be saying, that's great, Carl, but does this program actually work? Well, we have first-hand experience of this program working. Recently, so recent as December, we completed an AMP project for the UK's largest online retailer. We can't say who it is, but you probably guess who it is. But we migrated 14 instances, 148 business critical databases in 2 months. Now, it was a very difficult and complex project. Actually, 2 months seems like a really short time frame. It was really short. It was very difficult for many reasons. The housekeeping was terrible for many years prior to this project, and there was lots of craziness, but it was a success. It was a very good success. And how was it a success? Well, purely and simply because we used proven methodologies. Now, the CAF, or the Cloud Adoption Framework, is known as a set of proven documentation for implementation guidance, best practice, tools, and that gives a consumer of Azure the best way to deploy into the cloud. Now, for those of you who don't know, the CAF has been written not only by Microsoft experts themselves, but also some gold partners and also other industry experts as well. And it is a proven time over to be the best approach migrating to the cloud. So if you don't know what it is, I really suggest that you either reach out to one of your partners, Azure partners, or Google it as well. It's a really good documentation there. But it shows there are critical dimensions for every organization, not every team, every organization, that they should address to prepare for migrating. This is before you even start to migrate. Now, as techies, we like to jump straight in, but it's actually really important, and I can't stress this enough, and Microsoft pushes as well. You have to understand your current level of readiness for a migration for your project to actually be a success. Now, these dimensions span various planning, technical, and support aspects of a migration project. Now, the view you can see on your screen, this shows how the Cloud Adoption Framework and migration come together. And the first section there, you've got you defining your strategy. And this is actually where Microsoft or a partner would work with a customer or consumer, or you could do it by yourself, but you first need to define your cloud strategy, your vision, your roadmap, and get your leadership team aligned. So many times we come into customers and we see the leadership and the tech team are so far apart. You really need to get aligned where you're going. And once you do, it will definitely set you on the right path. The next thing that obviously is techies, particularly in Agile Planning, you're very much used to this, but this is a little bit more extended than that, because it's about getting a realistic sense of all your apps, your infra, your data estate. You could also do workload discovery in this section and assessment as well. You would identify workloads or scenarios that you'd want to migrate, and you build a business case why you move it there. And that all feeds into a migration plan. And once you have this plan, you can then move on to the ready phase. Now, you're not ready yet, because this phase is all about becoming ready. And this is about getting yourself or getting a customer ready to make the move by, first of all, upskilling the staff, making sure they've got the right people in place if that is an opportunity, but also includes building your landing zone, also known as a helipad, for the workload. So where all of the resources are going to be built, where they're going to be migrated to. And more often than not, that is designed around hub and spoke technology and all the other best practices as well. Stage 4 there on the right, you've got the adopt phase. Now, this is actually when you start doing migrations. You start moving batches of workloads, and it's known as a migration wave. This also is where you'd include your right sizing and end-to-end testing prior to any cutover. And you can see there at the bottom, the 5th, governance and management. This is actually an ongoing thing. Is you need to maintain an ongoing rhythm of governance and management during and after that move. And that would include ensuring backups, monitoring, security, everything like that, as well as cost management and subscription management as well. So that's an ongoing rhythm that you need to have from the beginning, thinking about it, but forevermore. Now you might be in your phase where you've decided you're going to move. Someone's going to move. You're going to help someone move or whatever. You need to think about your strategy, and you can see on the screen here Gartner's 4 R's. There's actually 5 R's, but we've dropped one off the bottom. So these 4 are rehost, refactor, re-architect, rebuild. The 5th one is retire. Obviously, we're not interested in that because we're doing a migration. But we can just talk about these a little bit here. A rehost is a simple lift and shift, moving your database as is to the cloud. And in that case, you'd move your SQL servers onto Azure VMs, and that makes sure you got no changes to your pre-existing app. However, you may wish to move to a PaaS offering such as managed instance, and you'd have to apply some changes to your app there to get it into the cloud, but that's known as refactoring your application or database. Or you might want to completely start afresh, rebuild as a cloud native application on Azure SQL database, and in which case Azure's got the tools as well to get you there. And the key point that Microsoft always like to plug when they show these 4 strategies is whatever option you take, there are tools to help you get there and resources to help you get there. It's a key thing, but this is an important part of your planning phase of deciding what your strategy is going to be. Just to introduce the SQL portfolio here. On the left, we've got an IaaS option of a SQL server on an Azure VM. And then you've got 2 PaaS offerings. You've got a managed instance, Azure SQL managed instance, sorry, and Azure SQL databases as well. So there's the 3 options you've got when you're moving into Azure with SQL. But how do you choose which one is right for you? This isn't always easy. So this flowchart is actually really useful when you want to make a decision, and we use it quite regularly when we do these sorts of projects. Now, the key question here is if you know that you're going to need OS level access and or you don't want to make any changes to your existing code base, pretty much your only option is SQL Server on an Azure VM. That does enable you to move straight to a VM. But let's say your goal is to modernize an existing app. You want to take advantage of all the features of a PaaS offering. The SQL managed instance might be the right fit for you. With a few tweaks to your existing application, you should be able to run on a managed instance and take full advantage of that instance very easily. But finally, if you're looking to begin building cloud native applications on Azure, or you're looking for the flexibility to automatically pause and resume intermittent workloads, really cool feature, then you've got to look at Azure SQL Database. That would be the perfect choice for you. So just take that in a little bit, have a look at those options that you've got. It's quite a simple yes/no scenario. But the other key thing to note is once you're actually on Azure, you can actually move backwards and forwards across these as well. So you could start on a hosted VM, and then you can move to an MI and then to a SQL database. It isn't a one-hit wonder. You can move with some work. Now, some of the complaints we often get is that all our tools and all our knowledge is going to be lost when we move to Azure. Well, this is a nice little slide to show you that it doesn't mean when you move that you're going to leave all your expertise knowledge behind. When you're on SQL servers on Azure VMs, you actually have the freedom to continue to use any BI tool that you know and love. However, if you choose to migrate to SQL database or managed instance, some of those tools, they're not going to work. So you're going to have to think about what tools you're going to use in the future. Now, thankfully, there are comparable features and they've been designed specifically for this, so you can use. So I always get these ones slightly mixed up, but you've got ADF SSIS for SSIS, you've got Power BI for SSRS, and Azure Analysis Services for SSAS. So all of you that use these tools on a regular basis, you're thinking, oh, what am I going to be able to use later on? There are comparable tools, and they are very, very good as well. It's also a good lot of documentation you can and training you can do on those tools. So one of the things you get as well when you're part of the AMP program, or even just using the cloud adoption framework, is you've got access to the Azure Migrate. And as the title says there, it's the hub for data migration. It's actually a tool set that you have access to as an Azure customer. And being a hub, it brings together assessments for applications, data, and infra migration tools, but as well as there's some third-party tools as well. And as part of it, you can discover, you can assess, you can migrate on-premise applications, infrastructure, and data. And the tool set has many scenarios that you can use as for Windows VMs, It's obviously a big one, but it also deals with Linux. You can do databases, applications, and virtual desktops if you're interested. Now, one of the cool parts about it is that it enables you to centrally plan and track the migration across multiple Microsoft and ISV tools. Now, if you want to simply do a lift and shift that we just discussed earlier, you want to lift and shift something to an Azure VM, Migrate is actually a very useful tool for you to use. However, if you wanted to go to something a little bit more complex, you may want to move to a PaaS service, for instance. You're probably going to want to consider the Azure Data Migration Service. Now, Devi's going to talk a little bit more about this in detail, but this shows you how the Azure Database Migration Service will help you move between the various scenarios. So we can do homogeneous SQL Server databases to Azure SQL Database, SQL Database Managed Instance, and SQL VM as well. Or you can do a heterogeneous database. For instance, if you're on Oracle now, you can move to Azure SQL Database, SQL Database MI, and Azure SQL VM. Perhaps you're on an open source database, so you've got MySQL or Postgres to Azure Database for MySQL, and also there's Azure Database for Postgres. I'm not really touching much on open source here, but there's a whole nother topic on open source databases, which we're obviously a big fan of. But also, if you want to use NoSQL databases as well, you can use MongoDB to Cosmos DB, and I believe Cassandra came to preview this month, although I haven't checked it. But one of the key takeaway points of this, you can see at the bottom there, near zero downtime using online migration scenarios. For us techies as well, the automation side of it is really cool because you've got PowerShell commandlets, you've got REST APIs as well, so you can fully automate your migrations to scale. Now, I've given you a ridiculously quick whistle-stop tour for migrations and some of the paths you may take. Now, that presentation is much bigger normally. It's normally given in an hour time slot, so it has been really shrunk down to fit in with this meetup. But now on something a little bit more interesting, probably for you, particularly those that are interested in migrating to Windows VMs. I introduce one of my teammates, Kris, and he's going to talk to you on that subject. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Carl. So I'm just going to share here my screen. Hopefully you guys are able to see my screen.
All good.
Okay, fantastic. So Carl, thank you for the introduction. My name is Kris. Anybody can call me Kris. And I work in the same team as Devi and Carl. As Carl, my background was open source and Linux system administration. And it's not ironically that we end up doing Windows migrations and this sort of these scenarios working with Azure, which is it's fantastic in a sense that that nowadays when you think about cloud computing, which wasn't a reality so long ago, we think now in cloud computing as the new normal. So it is today's words reflect this new reality. So with cloud computing, you have this ever-present cloud presence, and it is important for any sort of company that has a cloud presence to capitalize on the shift on this shift of innovation. So when you are thinking about any sort of data migration, or infrastructure migration, or Windows migration, everything starts with access and discovery. So it's here when you can gather the more data about our IT environment. So, and then you can elaborate our plan and decide how we're going to perform the migration. And then we migrate and optimize. So it's actually a binning cycle that you can use here, because if you get in a loop of a binning loop, we always improving each of that steps. So also with the cloud adoption, we also have this new this sort of in a way that you modernize, more cost saving, more costs you can save. So everything starts with the discovery phase, right? So where we can assess our apps, our workload, and then you have not just Azure Migrate too, but also some third-party tools that I will show you as well. And if you have opportunity to modernize our applications, you have a great deal of solutions for containers, for web apps and PaaS offerings. And if you go through the path of virtual machines migration, so we have our hub, as Carl mentioned, is the Azure Migrate. So, and we also have third-party tools for migration, like Movere and many others. And you have also opportunity to modernize the things. So if you are not just rehosting, but you are also refactoring, it's a good opportunity for us, for any company, to think how we can migrate those services to PaaS offers or SaaS offers, and so we can definitely benefit from cost saving and modernization of our applications and workloads. Also, just getting a little bit, just tied a little bit with what Carl already said, one of the things that we really use for, not just for cloud adoption, but also for migration scenarios, is the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. And I will post all the links of the resources in the end, and we can share these links with you as well. So on this, when you are ready on this cloud adoption lifecycle, it is on the ready phase of it that we gonna think about setup in Azure. You're gonna think about a landing zone, and also expand our best practice for the landing zone. So what actually we should address even before thinking of the migration per se. So we have to think about network design. We have to think about connectivity, authentication, security, and Azure it's fantastic how many options we have for those to address this sort of problems. But it's a topic for a whole new meetup. So what do we want to? But it's something that I would like to bring your attention to, right? So we have to think about the landing zone, the connection with our premises, if you have a hybrid environment or not, or if it's cloud-only adoption. So all of those things we have to have in consideration also before to migrate. But let's imagine that, like, let's imagine that you are on the ready, you are ready to migrate. So Azure Migrate is our hub. The Azure Migrate it brings to us the set of tools that you can discover and assess our on-premises virtual machines, not just on-premises, but also on public clouds. We can build in the dependency mapping. We can really use the intelligence of Azure to measure the right sizing of our Azure virtual machines, and I will show you this in the following slides. And then we migrate. We check the compatibility, if you need to remediate any potential issues, and then you finally use the Azure Migrate to migrate our workloads. So that is, if you are new to the portal, we can just simply look for Azure Migrate in the portal, and that's the landing page for our Azure Migrate. And here we have different scenarios. So for what we're going to talk on this presentation is focus mainly in Windows virtual machines migration, right? It's really simple. You just click on Access and Migrate Servers. You have then the opportunity to create a project and start your discovery of assessment and discovery. And here we can use Appliance, a virtual machine could be, to use as this discovery appliance and assessment appliance, or it's as simple as just upload a CSV file, and you can download that template. You just put your the IPs, addresses, names of the servers, fill up with certain informations, and you can upload and do your assessment. So and here is how we would then create an assessment. You have options of, as I said, to deploy a appliance or to use a CSV, and then we can define our assessment properties. So just to select like the locations that we want to deploy, the storage, the sizing, criteria, and so on. And here you have opportunity as well to reserve instances or to select pay as you go. After you do the assessment, we have this nice dashboard that is saying to us our readiness for the migration, and not just the readiness, but also the costs. How much that would cost for those virtual machines that you want to migrate. And then when we have assessed the virtual machine, assesses the workloads or the virtual machines that you want to migrate, we start then with the migration per se, and it is when we make use of a replication appliance, and this replication appliance can be a virtual machine, and if you're using VMware, it's a virtual machine on your workspace. And on this case here, I'm just showing you a scenario that you could migrate from AWS to Azure, just because it's more fun to migrate from AWS. But here it's when you have to think about the requirements for this appliance, and it needs to be either a Windows Server 2016 or a Windows Server 2012 R2. And minimum CPU cores are 8 vCPUs, and it's recommended to have 3 disks for the OS system, for the process server cache, and for the retention drive, and all of them with at least 600 gigabytes of space. So the replication appliance setup, it's simple. So once that you have that virtual machine deployed, the simplest way to do that, it's connect to the portal, and you just disable the the Internet Explorer Enhanced Security Configuration, and then we go to Discover on Azure Server Migration, Discover, and you select physical servers or others, and then it will bring for you the option to download that replication appliance setup. And once that you have downloaded that, it's a simple process installation as everything on Microsoft next finish. So there are a serial of things that the appliance checks for you. So once that you have installed, the next step then it will be, and you have also your registration key, which you need to save because you're going to use that on the next step, which is to manage your accounts and Vault. So the Azure Migrate use Vault backup and to replicated the information and the data and migrate it. So we need here to add our account to connect to the virtual machines. And here where you add our username and password and credentials, you do the vault registration. And once that you have done that, you need to, on the case of migrating virtual machines from AWS, we need to install the mobility services. So it's also simple. This mobility service, the installation, the installation file for the mobility service it's hosted on your appliance. So you check, you go to the appliance, copy the file, and register the mobility setup. Once that you have done that, so after a couple of minutes, you're going to start to have the discovered servers. So it's just here on the screen where you see discovered servers. So that automatically comes to your project. So the next step then, it is once that you have discovered the servers, the virtual machines, we can start to replicate them. So it's also simple. You click on the replication on the project, and then you select our source settings. You say where is our replication appliance. We selected then our virtual machines, the virtual machines that we want to migrate. And here's when it really comes to handy. All that thoughts, all that time that we spend thinking about our landing zone, because here is the moment that you're gonna need to add the virtual network, the subnets. So it's important to spend a little bit of to spend some time planning how it will be our network, the IP addresses allocation, and so on. You also have opportunity here to set up how is the disk type, if you're gonna use HDD or if you're gonna use more advanced technology like SSD. And here we do that setup. And once that you are done with that, it's just start to replicate. Once that you have your virtual machines replicated, we can then start perform some tests. If you want to test how that will be migrated to Azure, you can perform some tests, or you can actually go to the migration step by clicking on Migrate. So in the migration, you then select the virtual machines that you want to migrate. And when you click on Migrate, we have these on this dashboard telling us how many virtual machines are in progress, how many have, if any, has been failed. And once that it's all migrated, it changes to done. So here, and then you see that we change the status from, we add then the migrated service. We have, in this case, 3 servers migrated. We have discovered them and we replicate them, and you finally migrated them. So here, those are some really important links that if in your company you are thinking or you are in a project to migrate any sort of workloads, I think that those are good key websites of reference. So I will publish that as well and share with you. And I just also, just before finish this presentation, I would like to show you how here on the portal. So that's the Azure Migrate. Okay, so you can come here and now and that is new. So we can migrate SQL servers only, and you can use to migrate to Windows, Linux, and also web apps, data boxes, and VDI. But once that you have, and that is where I wanted to show you. So I have the discovery and assessment, and I have also the migration. But Azure Migrate is not the only tool that you have enabled to have as option. You have a list of other tools to migrate and also to do our assessment. So Movere, for instance, it was recently bought by Microsoft. So we have really good stuff here. So that was my my introduction to Azure Migrate. Now I will hand over to Devi, and she has a great presentation as well to show us.
Thank you, Kris. Let me share my screen. I hope that everyone can see my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So my name is Devi, and I work with Kris and Carl in Elastic Cloud, and I have a background in Unix and databases. And we will now talk about what are the different phases in a typical migration project, how to perform database assessments, and more importantly, how do we determine what is the appropriate size when we go to Azure, how many vCores we need to have, and things like that. It's important to size the instance correctly in cloud. We will then focus on the migration tools which are provided by Microsoft. There are also a lot of other tools as well which are provided by third parties and independent software vendors, but we are not going to touch upon that. We are going to talk a little bit about the migration tools provided by Microsoft for assessment and migration. We'll also do a quick demo of the tools so that you get a feel of how the tools work and how easy it is to use these tools. And finally, we'll also talk about some of the optimization techniques that we can use in the migrated instance to make it perform better or to leverage the capabilities in cloud. At any point, in time during the presentation, if you have any questions, please send them through the chat. We'll try and answer them. Okay, so when we talk about migration, right, not just database migration, when we talk about any migration process, there are three main phases in it: the pre-migration, migration, and post-migration. In the pre-migration step, that's where we take inventory of the databases in our enterprise or within our business unit, which we are planning to migrate. And then we need to identify what are the dependencies and what are the applications that use this, and what are the databases that needs to be migrated together, and which one needs to be migrated first. We need to decide on the priority, and all of that is done in the pre-migration stage. In addition to that, it is in the pre-migration stage, we assess our databases and we decide, okay, this needs to go into a PaaS offering, or this needs to go into a VM. So all that assessment is done in the pre-migration state. Also, in addition to that, we also decide the target SKU size and any migration blockers which are there in the source system. Say, for example, my source is running a very old version of SQL Server, say 2005. Then is there anything that I need to mitigate before I can do the actual migration? So all of these are identified and fixed in the pre-migration stage. So suppose if I am running something like Sybase or Oracle, then in the pre-migration stage, I also need to perform something called as Schema Conversion in addition to the discover and assess subphases within pre-migration. So Microsoft provides a tool called SSMA, SQL Server Migration Assistant. It needs to be downloaded based on what your source version is. If it is Oracle, then you need to download SSMA for Oracle. If it is MySQL, you need to download SSMA for MySQL. And this tool is going to perform the schema conversion so that it is suitable for the target environment. So this same tool will be used to perform the migration in case of a heterogeneous environment. So once the pre-migration activity is completed, we then move on to migration. And the migration itself can be done using a variety of tools. Microsoft provides DMA, which is short for Data Migration Assistant. It is the same tool that we will use to perform the assessment. And the same tool can be used to get the SKU recommendation from Microsoft. There's also a tool called Azure Database Migration Service. And this service can be used to migrate our databases to Azure. And this tool supports both online and offline migration. And in case of an online migration, the data in the source and target is kept in sync with the help of transaction logs. And when we are ready to point our application to the target Azure environment, we need to do a cutover. And then the database can be released for the application and the business users. And finally, in the post-migration step, we will run several performance tests and functional tests, and any changes that we want to perform in the database, any optimization that we want to perform in the database, we will do it in the post-migration step. So these are the tools that are available for assessment and migration. For assessment, we have SSMA, DMA, and DEA. And for migration, we can use DMA, SSMA, and Azure Database Migration Service. See, on the left-hand side, we have the supported source databases, and on the right-hand side, we have the targets to which we can migrate to in Azure. SQL Server migrations are supported for versions starting from 2005 to 2017, and a SQL Server which is running on-prem can be migrated to any of the Azure targets like Azure SQL Database or Azure SQL Managed Instance, Azure SQL Elastic Pools, or simply SQL servers running on VMs. And for other sources like Oracle, Sybase, DB2, there is also support for MySQL, PostgreSQL. There's support for migrating from Oracle to PostgreSQL, Mongo to Cosmos DB. All these are supported. And when we come to the DMA, Data Migration Assistant, this tool is used to assess the source database to identify if there is any compatibility issue or if there is any feature parity issue. For example, I may be using Service Broker in my database. And if I want to go to Azure SQL Database, then this tool is going to tell me, hey, Service Broker is not available in Azure SQL Database. Instead, a managed instance might be a more suitable offering for you. Or if you really don't need Service Broker, you can disable that feature and you can go to Azure SQL Database. So the DMA is going to analyze our database, and it is going to list out all these compatibility and feature parity issues. And it's not limited to just that. It's also going to list out the deprecated data types. If there are any joins which are unsupported, because I may be, having some joins which are performing very well in 2012, but when I move to the latest version, it may not be, it may not be supported, and as a result, it may result in deprecated performance. So it is going to identify even the issues which are not blockers, but could cause potential issues. And DMA, in addition to doing the assessment, has a PowerShell script, a SKU recommendation PowerShell script, which we can run in the source environment. It needs to run for an extended period of time so that it's able to capture all kinds of workloads. So the longer it runs, it will be able to recommend the SKUs more accurately. And we have another interesting tool called DEA, which stands for Database Experimentation Assistant. And as the name suggests, it helps to evaluate the target version of SQL for a specific workload. And this is not useful for just cloud migrations. It's even useful when we're doing migration from say 2012 to 2017 on-prem. So typically, this is used in upgrade and migration scenarios when we are upgrading from older version of SQL Server to the latest version of SQL Server. And DEA does comparison of workloads at query performance level, and it provides greater confidence when customers are performing upgrade or migration. So at a very high level, DEA is going to evaluate the SQL workload. So how is it going to do that? It is going to capture the workload on your source SQL Server environment. So you know that this is your peak workload. So you can let DEA run and it will capture the workload. And it is going to replay that workload on two different targets. The first target will be something that mimics your source environment. So it's going to replay that workload on the target. And the second target is going to be your Azure managed instance or Azure SQL database. So it's going to replay that. And it is going to analyze the output of target 1 and target 2 for the same workload which ran on your production server. So this is a very interesting and very useful tool for capturing your workload and to understand your workload and how well it is going to perform in your target database version. And when it comes to the actual migration itself, Microsoft provides Azure Database Migration Service, and this is a service which can be used for both database migrations. It supports online and offline migration, and it can also be used for schema and data migration. So we will talk about that when we do the demo as well. And another great advantage of the database migration service is that it has orchestration capabilities. So when you're doing migration of n number of databases, when you have 20, 30, 40 databases, you can use the orchestration capabilities of ADMS, and you can group the databases together for migration instead of doing one after the other manually. Now let's do a demo of DMA and let's see how we can assess our databases before they are migrated to Azure. I will connect to my Windows machine. This is my Windows machine. So I have a SQL Server 2012, and this is, let me quickly refresh that. So I have these 5 databases. These are just sample databases. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to download the Data Migration Assistant, DMA. I've already downloaded the tool and installed it. So I'll just fire it. So here first I will get started by creating an assessment. Here I have the option of performing assessment as well as migration. We will talk about migration later. So I can give any name for the assessment. And the assessment is going to be on database engine. My target is going to be managed instance. I'm going to check for compatibility and feature parity. I will do an assessment on just this database in the interest of time. So it's saying that there are no feature parity issues. It is checking for compatibility issues now. So it's done with the assessment. It is saying that there are 2 unqualified joins detected. So I can upload this assessment to Azure Migrate, the centralized hub that Kris was talking about. I've already uploaded it to Azure Migrate. I can quickly show you how it looks. So I've assessed this instance, and it is going to list here as well whether there are any migration blockers, if there are any breaking changes, whether this particular database is ready for SQL DB, whether it is ready for SQL VM, and what is the compatibility level. So all these things are, we can see in Azure Migrate. All right. Also, yeah, I'll also show you how the SKU recommendation will look like. When the SKU recommendation is run, it is going to give you something like this. And if you specify your subscription, resource group, VNet, subnet, all these details, and click on generate provisioning script, it will even generate the script to provision the instance in Azure. All right, so when we migrate a database using Azure Database Migration Service, these are the high-level steps. We need to provide either existing backups in a network share, or we need to let ADMS take the backup by itself. But we need to provide access for the service to the share. And then DMS is going to pick up the files from the network share, and it is going to upload it into Azure storage. And the files will be copied, and the instance, the database will be restored. And the transaction log backups will be applied until the cutover. And once we perform cutover, the last set of transaction logs will be applied, and the changes will be in sync. And then we can finally point our application connection strings to point to the managed instance which has been migrated. We will also do a quick demo using Azure Database Migration Service. So I have the demo migration service here. I'll create a new migration project. My target is going to be managed instance. I will perform an offline data migration. I will specify the source details and connection strings. I will specify my target managed instance. I have already created a managed instance. So I'm specifying the target connection details. So it's listing all the databases that are available. So if I want to migrate one, I can just select one. If I want to migrate all, I can select all. I'll select all of them. I don't want to migrate any logins. And here is the option where we have the option of providing the backup files ourselves, or we can let Azure to create the backup files. I'll let Azure to create the backup files. And here I need to give the share name where the service will take the backup. So this is the share where ADMS is going to take the backup. And I've already generated the SAS URI for the blob storage to which ADMS is going to copy the files. So here is the summary. We have the target details and the target version, the source details. I'll click on Start Migration. So here it is saying there are 5 databases which are in progress. If I drill down, it is going to show the status of whether it is backing up or copying or restoring and all that. Now I will go to my managed instance. I can see that the databases are being restored here. Now if I go here and check the status, it is restoring. It says this is completed. And 2 more are completed. And hit refresh again. So all of them are completed now. And here it says it's completed as well. So this is how we can run the migration using ADMS. We can also run the migration using a DMA. The tool that we used for the assessment can be used for performing migration, but it can only be used if we are migrating to Azure SQL database. If we are migrating to a managed instance, I'll show you that option. If we are migrating to a managed instance, then it says use ADMS to migrate. So it only supports if we are migrating to Azure SQL database. All right. Azure Migrate, like we saw earlier in the discussion today, it provides end-to-end visibility of the migration in one central repository, and it lets us to track the throughput of the migration process, capturing information from all the tools, be it Microsoft provided tools or third-party tools, and it provides a visualization with a proper dashboard across discovery, assessment, and migration. Okay, so now we have performed assessment and we have migrated our databases to Azure. So how do we optimize? We can perform regular housekeeping activities. We can archive unused data. We can implement column store indexes. Column store indexes, when they are implemented on the right kind of objects, it reduces the storage requirement by 55%. That's a big save. Partitioning. Again, when we identify tables for partitioning, we also need to ensure that the underlying queries are partition aware so that partition pruning happens. Again, data file configuration of the managed instances is another key thing for achieving good performance. Wherever we are implementing partitioning, incremental statistics can be implemented. It goes hand in hand with partitioning so that we don't spend a lot of resources gathering statistics for the whole table. Instead, if we can gather statistics just for the incremental data or the delta. So these are some of the things that we can implement to achieve a good performance, to leverage performance in cloud. And finally, to summarize, Microsoft provides a whole set of tools which will facilitate the journey into cloud migration, starting from your assessment to migration. And Azure Migrate is again another great hub, which gives us good visibility. So that's the the whole set of tools that you can use to help you in your cloud migration journey. If you have any questions, you can ask in the chat. We will be able to answer them.
Devi, do you have any consideration regarding to the how we can find the right SKU for the workloads that are migrating? We have a couple of recommendations from Microsoft, but perhaps you can talk a little bit of our experience.
Yeah. So the tool DMA, it has a SKU recommendation PowerShell script, which needs to be run on your existing physical server where you have your instances. Let it run when you have your peak, when you will have your peak workload running. Typically, you can let it run for 24 to 48 hours. It will then give you the SKU recommendation. So it will then say, okay, you can go to general purpose with 16-week course or 32-week course. So it is going to give you that sort of a recommendation. So that can be a very good starting point. And also you can leverage tools like DEA to see how your workload is going to perform. If I have like 32-week course in my physical server, and if I provision 16-week course in Azure, I can use DEA to capture the workload and run it on the Azure instance and see whether my workload is performing the same or not before I do my actual production migration. So these are the tools that we can use to assess how well our workload is going to perform and to get the SKU recommendation. I hope that answers. Okay, I will share the link to the SKU recommendation.
I think, Devi, I posted the link on the chat actually, but please, perhaps you have something different. Just you can also publish.
Yeah, this is the one. This is the one. So if you're going for to be on the safer side, it's always better to have a like for like, and then you can always scale it down. But if you undersize it, then your workload may fail. But the SKU recommendation is a great starting point, but you have to let it run longer, and it should capture your peak workload. There's no point in running the SKU recommendation script for a 12-hour period when nobody is using the database. Then you will not get the appropriate recommendation. And this is the correct link for that. Any other questions from anybody else?
Not at the moment. I can see no new question. If anybody has any question.
Okay, brilliant. Great talk. Very shift in pace for us guys. Having heard about search last week, now I think we sort of got really into the nuts and bolts of how people start using Azure and start that migration plan. Guys, I think everybody, thank you very much for attending. If you do have any questions for Carl, Devi, and Kris, they're incredibly approachable. I'm going to add the YouTube link. I'll send it out on our standard comms for the user group comms, and then I'm sure the guys are very approachable. So if you want to talk to them about anything or ask them any questions, I'm sure that they'll leave their details in YouTube comment section, and you can just follow up with them, or I'll ping them out. As part of our user group circular. Thank you very much for attending, and I will send out a missive soon with our next couple of months of meetings. Okay. Goodbye.